A man, to save his beloved one, voluntarily engaged in a transaction with the demon. As the price, he must offer his own life. However, he cannot sacrifice himself by committing suicide. It must be carried out by another demon. Such harsh conditions are almost impossible for an ordinary person to fulfill. However, in the hospital where the man worked, it was full of demons trying to land on the world. Using the demons stored there, he conducted this explosive suicide easily, but the demon played a little trick during the process. When the man returned to the past for real and was about to save his beloved, the demon suddenly took away his body. Now he could do nothing but watch his girlfriend dying in front of him. The man was named Ivanov. A month ago, he was just an ordinary surgeon. During one surgery, he suddenly noticed a spider on his shoulder. Ivanov was startled, and his hand twitched a little. It was this slight movement that accidentally punctured the patient's blood vessel. The people in the operating room were instantly thrown into chaos. After a struggle, they managed to stop the bleeding. The first thing that Ivanov did was to stomp the awful spider to death. He then incessantly questioned the medical staff present about who was cleaning the operating room that day. Just when a girl stepped forward, Ivanov realized that the spider he had just crushed had gone. His anger instantly disappeared. Before Ivanov could figure out what was going on, a deafening noise suddenly filled his mind, and in the next moment, he passed out in the operating room. When Ivanov came to again, he found himself lying in a bed of the hospital. His colleagues in neurology conducted a thorough examination on him and discovered that a tumor had developed in Ivanov's brain, which was already in its terminal stage, with no possibility of being cured. Logically speaking, symptoms should have appeared long ago. For some reason, until now, Ivanov experienced hallucinations for the first time. After hearing this news, Ivanov's heart sank to despair. However, the following words that his colleague said relighted a spark of hope in Ivanov.
Есть одна клиника. Довольно специфическое заведение, но при удачном стечении обстоятельств вы можете избежать.
According to his colleague, the private hospital called Clinical Zone 13, not well known though, specialized in treating various rare cancers. At first, Ivanov just ignored this, saying, after all, as a doctor, he understood his condition very well, as he would die for sure. He only wanted to relax before his death. But as time went on, the noise caused by the tumor grew so loud that Ivanov could hardly bear it. He recalled the hospital his colleague mentioned. With a mindset of trying it out, Ivanov dialed the number on the business card. Moments later, the staff took Ivanov to the hospital. Compared to where he worked, this place felt like a small clinic. The staff here were also quite unprofessional. Even though he had already undergone 2 examinations at his hospital, they still required him to be examined again here. In Ivanov's opinion, this hospital was nothing but a greedy scam operation. He laid down on the testing equipment as instructed. After that, a medical staff member placed a bag on Ivanov's chest and repeatedly reminded him that, during the examination, he should not take it off under any circumstances. The more seriously they treated this, the more curious Ivanov became. He examined the bag closely. Inside, there were only some fragments of bones from unknown creatures. It didn't seem special at all. This further convinced Ivanov that it was just some tricks to get money. Afterward, the medical staff started the machine according to the procedure. Once Ivanov entered the examination equipment, a chanting sound suddenly filled his ears. It was Nurse Lisa, who was reciting spells into the microphone from the side. Seeing this, Ivanov felt insulted. He decisively threw the bones aside, being about to leave. In the next second, the world before him suddenly turned crimson. Immediately after, he saw a monster about to burst out from the examination equipment. Seeing this, Ivanov quickly picked up the discarded bones and placed them back on his chest. Only then did the terrifying scene disappear. After this incident, for the first time that Ivanov realized, there were indeed weird phenomena in the world he had never understood. Watching all of this, Lisa also wore a grave expression. Because she had just learned from a colleague nearby that Ivanov's symptoms were actually type 1, Lisa didn't explain what this meant. Instead, the incredibility in her words already indicated that it was unusual. Ivanov's condition was soon reported to the higher-ups. Director Nock, upon learning that Ivanov was of type 1, quickly issued a command that he must not be allowed to leave the hospital. Now Ivanov finally passed the examination but fell into a coma again. When he woke up again, he had already been admitted into the hospital. Director Nock treated him in person. He used obscure words, only hinting that the thing in Ivanov's head was quite tricky, but the hospital would do everything possible to assist him. If it were an ordinary hospital, Ivanov would definitely think this was a scam. but after what he had been through, he knew that Knock was the only one that he could rely on. With a heavy heart, Ivanov returned to his hospital room. Observing the drip feeding that the nurse offered, he suddenly noticed a large spider inside. Ivanov thought he had hallucinations again, so he didn't pay any attention to it. Moreover, even if it was a real spider, in such a weird hospital as this, it wasn't such a big deal. However, he clearly had underestimated the weirdness of this hospital. On the next day, when he was wandering along the corridor, he accidentally heard some unusual moaning from behind the door. It was evident that someone was engaged in some life activity inside. By taking a closer look, he discovered that this room was actually the hospital director's office. Ivanov asked a medical staff member passing by to confirm whether it was a legitimate place. She replied that someone was receiving treatment in there and asked Ivanov to wait for a moment. After a moment, a man, seemingly almost paralyzed, walked out of the office. Ivanov entered the office shyly and saw the hospital director adjusting his clothing. Ivanov felt embarrassed. He could only hurriedly change the topic, asking what medication had been applied to him before. As it was so effective, the director informed him that it was the infusion liquid of some kind of spider. Hearing this answer, Ivanov felt even more awkward. He could only change the topic to the patients here. However, in his several attempts to chat, his questions were brought to an end by the director, so he didn't know how to continue and could only leave the office. While he was wandering along the corridor, everyone around him suddenly collapsed, and the world before his eyes started to change dramatically. In the blink of an eye, he found himself back in that crimson world, and liquids kept flooding towards him. Ivanov vaguely heard a voice asking,
"Что дал тебе право приходить?"
Since Ivanov couldn't figure out why he would be here, his refusal to respond angered the controller of the liquid, who immediately wrapped him in layers of liquid, as if intending to drown him. At this critical moment, the liquid suddenly vanished into nowhere, and Ivanov also got free from the crimson world. The people who had collapsed around him rose one after another and vomited uncontrollably. It seemed that everything just now was nothing but a nightmare. But Ivanov knew this was no coincidence. In fact, it was all a demon's trick. The reason for everything was the girl Ivanov had seen. She, at that time, was pushed into the operating room. The surgeon instructed everyone to make preparations, and the most important part was to inject a special agent into the girl's body. But then, an unexpected incident occurred. The two catheters, which should be connected to each other, could not draw near no matter what. They repelled each other like magnets. They even bent from the repelling. The surgeon had no idea about what was happening. Assuming that the connection was successful, she began the surgery soon. This completely enraged the demon in the patient. In the next moment, the girl's eyes were fully possessed by darkness. As her eyes turned black, people in the operating room began to faint one by one. By the time the surgeon realized something was wrong, it was already too late. In the next moment, she herself passed out too. But the demon didn't stop because of this. Soon after, people outside the operating room passed out as well. At last, almost everyone in the hospital passed out, leaving only Director not clear-minded. He rushed into the operating room and took a chunk of flesh out from the patient's body. This was the connection part between the demon and its host. So at the next moment, the people controlled by the demon escaped from the nightmare, and the hospital finally got back to normal. This event confirmed to Ivanov that Knock could cure him. However, he was still curious about why he referred to him as Type 1, hesitated for a moment. Knock finally revealed the truth to Ivanov. According to the hospital's classification, demons were ranked from high to low as types 1, 2, and 3. Type 1 was the most powerful kind, representing greater demons and above, that can suppress other types of demons, which are extremely dangerous. Type 2 referred to as ordinary demons. While they were also dangerous, they were still within the scope that could be managed. Type 3 referred to as demon larvae. Although they can also cause supernatural phenomena, their destructive power was very low, and some could only disturb people's daily life without any substantial danger. Now, as a host for a Type 1 demon, the hospital could not handle him for now, though they certainly would not neglect him. Thus, Knock made a private decision, that is, to invite Ivanov into the hospital, which would not only help other hosts but also facilitate his own treatment. Ivanov immediately agreed. However, when he saw the onboarding ceremony, he had some second thoughts. The HR personnel required him to remove all his clothing, including underwear and accessories. Just when Ivanov thought they were about to conduct some sort of life exercise, they suddenly threw all his belongings into the incinerator. It turned out that, based on the hospital's requirements, once one was enrolled, all his previous personal belongings had to be destroyed. Having gone through the absurd onboarding process, Ivanov's eyesight had been broadened. After several days of study, the hospital director believed the timing was good now and assigned Ivanov a patient, who was named Rita, and like Ivanov, she was also referred by someone. After this period of learning, Ivanov also learned that the referrers were actually agents of the hospital. They referred to themselves as scouts. For every patient they referred, they could receive a bonus, which would truly relax them, from the director. However, this was not what Ivanov cared about. He briefly assessed the patient's condition. She claimed that, for the past 3 months, whenever she fell into sleep, she would experience paralysis throughout her body and always felt that someone was choking her by the neck. Ivanov was merely a surgeon, he knew nothing about it. However, according to hospital procedures, he needed to take the patient to examination first. Then, with the information collected, they would know the demon type in her body. However, during the actual operation, a new problem arose, because Ivanov housed a type 1 demon, which could directly suppress lower-level demons. As a result, during Rita's examination, the equipment showed no response at all, and the type of demon in Rita couldn't be tested. Facing such a tricky issue on his first treatment, he could only ask for help from the hospital director. Having understood the situation briefly, the hospital director had a few preliminary ideas. Perhaps they could determine the type of demon within Rita through an EEG test. However, at this moment, an unexpected incident occurred again. Rita told everyone that she didn't want further treatment and just wanted to leave here as soon as possible. The hospital naturally wouldn't agree to such a request. By letting go of an unknown type of demon, this would lead to unimaginable losses. But no matter how everyone tried to persuade her, Rita kept her mind still. In the end, the attending physician, Ivanov, could only adopt a more forceful approach. He put her into a coma. Then, he performed an EEG test on Rita. This action left Nurse Lisa in shock, as she had no idea that the Ivanov who had been gentle had such a rough side. However, his unauthorized EEG test on the patient caused big trouble. It turned out that during the test, Rita suddenly began to convulse repeatedly and made strange moaning sounds. Her body began to contort into various difficult postures. Obviously, Rita's body was being controlled by some kind of demon, and the reason for this was entirely due to Ivanov's reckless decision to perform the EEG test on her. As time proceeded, Rita's EEG results became increasingly confusing. Lisa, worrying that something might happen to Rita, stopped the test in a hurry. Sure enough, in the next moment, Rita's body instantly stopped convulsing, and she regained her senses. However, being awake though, she still couldn't control her limbs. Ivanov's situation was soon known to the hospital director. He figured out the type of demon in Rita and was very displeased with Ivanov's rash actions. However, given that he was only a newcomer, he didn't impose any punishment. When Rita requested a hospital transfer, the hospital director refused her request to her face. Then, in a very ambiguous manner, he straddled Rita's body.
Ты думаешь, тебе подарили чудесную возможность получать во сне? Это существо, которое приходит к тебе. Рано или поздно оно тебя убьет.
According to the director's speculation, this is a nightmare from the Type 2 demons. Of course, it is also well known by another name, which is succubus. The treatment would be quite simple: to remove the gallstones from the patient's body with a surgery and seal it with an amethyst. However, now, because of Ivanov's reckless actions, the nightmare had been completely awakened, making it nearly impossible to resolve the demon through surgery. According to previous cases, once the nightmare senses a separation from its host, it will immediately cause the patient's death. This matter was caused by Ivanov, and he naturally would take the responsibility, so the director granted him access to the hospital archive, so he could enter and review relevant information for the treatment. After a thorough search, Ivanov found the relevant files. According to the files, the nightmare cannot survive without its host. However, during its parasitic phase, it continuously stimulates the host's most primal impulses through dreams. However, the gallstones in the gallbladder can only be tested using amethyst instruments. Therefore, surgery is typically used for treatment. This information was mostly understood by Ivanov, and symptomatic treatment would be of no use at all. Just at this moment, he felt a bit thirsty. Being about to get a glass of water, he encountered something unusual too. It seemed that the water here was deliberately teasing him. Whenever Ivanov approached, it would stop flowing automatically, but as soon as he left, it would return to normal again. Ivanov, being overwhelmed by the nightmare thing, slapped the water bucket without thinking. No one would expect that the entire bucket would explode in an instant, and the water inside bizarrely gathered together and floated in the air. Before Ivanov could figure out what was happening, the streams of water quickly surged toward him, Fortunately, at this moment, Lisa rushed over, hearing the sound. Seeing this scene, she took out a game console in no time. In the next second, the streams of water turned and charged at the game console. Lisa grabbed a bottle and captured the stream of water with ease. As Lisa said, this stream of water was also a demon, but of type 3. It liked to stay in confined spaces such as bottles. Being naughty is a natural feature. It would cause no harm. Some even kept it as a pet. However, after what had just happened, Ivanov dared not underestimate this little creature. But thanks to it, Ivanov thought of a way to treat Rita, since the nightmare would lead to the death of its host by leaving the host at a certain distance. So as long as they maintained contact, everything would be fine. According to Ivanov's plan, he could use an endoscope and a claw made of amethyst to extract the gallstones formed by the nightmare from the bile ducts. As soon as he took them out, he would seal them with amethyst. Then Rita just needed to carry the amethyst every day to avoid dying from the distance. The nightmare would have its powers sealed, being unable to affect Rita's life any longer. This idea was met with everyone's approval. After a brief preparation, the tormented Rita finally found relief. In another crimson space, a creature that had been choking Rita's neck reluctantly vanished from her. Without the interference of the demon, Rita's life got back on track again. Moreover, without those impulses, she didn't even want to be with her husband anymore. Rita surprisingly requested to stay in the hospital. Her husband could only agree to her request. In contrast, Ivanov's problems remained unsettled. Moreover, because of the constant contact with Rita, and that he had even been drawn into the world of demons, the demon in him awakened at a surprisingly fast speed. He could hear the sound of insects crawling in his brain, which made Ivanov increasingly agitated. The hospital staff noticed his situation. Therefore, although he displayed remarkable talent during this treatment, some medical staff, represented by the director, remained skeptical about Ivanov's future. They believed he would one day be consumed by the demon and would inevitably become a new trouble. Ivanov, of course, was unaware of their thoughts. He, lying on his hospital bed, constantly pondered where he should go. Just at this time, his roommate Henry asked him to help record a video. Seeing that Henry had a phone, Ivanov had a plan. Since he had been here for such a long time, he hadn't reported his safety to his family. Thus, Ivanov requested to borrow Henry's phone. Henry agreed immediately, hoping that Ivanov could get some medication for him later. In fact, the demon in him was not a dangerous kind. It only caused some continuous pains. Just when Henry was handing over the phone to him, they were caught by a staff member. Since this was a serious violation of hospital regulations, the two then were taken to the director's office. To prevent any related information from being disclosed, the director confiscated the phone and intended to teach Henry a lesson. Ivanov believed this was all caused by him and was about to take all the blame. However, the director clearly did not want Ivanov to get involved, so he assigned Ivanov a new patient, urging him to deal with it in no time. He had to come to the examination room as instructed. This time, the one accompanying Ivanov was not Lisa, but a janitor named Sam. After a brief examination, Sam immediately named the demon. This shocked Ivanov in an instant. However, Sam stated that this was not because of his abilities, but rather the demon's honesty.
Назови своего демона.
Vila.
Most demons don't lie, so you may just ask them for their names directly. According to the data, Vila was also categorized as a type 2 demon, which would only take pregnant women as their hosts and love to torment its host. Thus, it would cause continuous delays in the delivery date. Just as Ivanov was thinking about how to deal with the demon Vila, the director was also imposing punishment on Henry. The punishment would be the extraction of the energy rod. Under the influence of some mysterious power, blood started to pour out from Henry's nose with only a glance, and he collapsed when everything was over. The director, on the other hand, walked with newfound strength. Based on Ivanov's diagnosis of the patient, the hospital staff held a meeting to discuss how to proceed. Ivanov thought of it in a simple way: to perform a cesarean section directly and end the suffering caused by Vila with force. But as soon as he proposed it, his proposal was rejected at once. This was something that the demon had anticipated already. According to previous data, for all the cesarean section plans, almost all the infants would die in a few days, and for the few that managed to survive, they would suffer from various developmental issues. At this moment, Director Nock thought of a solution. Since the cause of this situation was the demon, maybe they could negotiate with it. Thus, under Nock's leadership, the three of them, with Ivanov and Sam included, entered the Crimson World through a certain ritual. Seeing the demon Vila that was possessing the patient, Nock stated their purpose: Vila had no interest in negotiating with humans at all. Seeing that the negotiation was about to fail, Nock immediately declared that Ivanov was the host of a great demon. Upon hearing the title of a higher level of demon, Vila took notice slightly. Upon a careful examination of Ivanov, it expressed the willingness to make concessions. However, it insisted on taking at least one, between the mother and the infant, then kicked the three out of the demon's world. Ivanov relayed the message to the patient, hoping that she could give up the fetus. Only in this way could her life be spared. However, the woman kept pleading with Ivanov to save both herself and her child. This put Ivanov in a dilemma, and he could only give it a try, even though he knew it was nearly impossible. As time passed, there came the day of the woman's delivery. Just as the surgery was conducted halfway, the demon Vila showed up suddenly. He asked Ivanov for his choice. However, no matter how the demon asked, Ivanov kept silent. Meanwhile, taking the baby out with force, his actions undoubtedly angered Vila. In the next moment, the heartbeats of both the patient and the child stopped at the same time. As a punishment, Ivanov was also dragged into the crimson world of demons. The woman, with her baby in her arms, stared blankly at Ivanov, as if blaming him for not being able to save them. The demon mocked Ivanov for his incompetence, then it offered its temptations, that as long as Ivanov offered his life to it, Vila would send the mother and child back to the human world. Ivanov found himself in a difficult dilemma. In the real world, everyone witnessed Ivanov suddenly pass out during the surgery. The director rushed over to check on him, having confirmed his symptoms. The director placed some mysterious bones on Ivanov's body and started to chant incantations. Soon after, the director aged at a shocking speed. In just a few breaths, he transformed from a vibrant youth into an elderly figure. However, the director did not care at all. She ordered people to bind the bones onto the metal fishing bobber, then placed it into Ivanov's hand. At the same time, Ivanov, in the demon world now, got a metal fishing bobber in his hand from nowhere. The demon Vila was frightened and fled instantly, so Ivanov got back to the real world, and both the patient and the baby regained their heartbeats. Although this seemed to have come to an end, Ivanov felt that something was going wrong still. He couldn't figure out why the demon would want his life, nor could he understand why the demon would be frightened away by a fishing bobber. So he went to Director Nock with the metal fishing bobber, in the hope of getting some information from her. But when Nock saw the fishing bobber, he was scared too and threw it aside immediately. He then ordered the HR personnel to destroy the bobber at once. Till the end, Nock hadn't explained to Ivanov why, and he simply expelled him. Ivanov was completely unaware that, in the brief contact just now, Nock's hand had been severely burned by the bobber. Clearly, he was no ordinary human. From the conversation between Nock and the director, it was known that he was also a host of a Type 1 demon. Moreover, it seemed that, due to his elderly age, the demon wanted a new host. However, the reason why the director came to Nock this time was to ask him to treat a special patient. This seemed to violate some regulations, so Nock refused it decisively. But the director threatened him with Ivanov. It turned out that Nock had also violated regulations when recruiting Ivanov. Now, he was being held accountable for it. Nock could only agree to the request, but at the same time, he left a harsh warning. Not long after, the entire hospital was on guard, and all the medical staff hid back in their own rooms. Although the radio claimed that it was about the treatment of a Type 3 demon, in fact, it was to prevent everyone from seeing the mysterious patient whom the director was secretly bringing in. As in this treatment, they needed to utilize the abilities of the demon in Henry. Ivanov was directly kicked out and was locked in a room with Lisa. Meanwhile, in Henry's hospital ward, all participants were on high alert. Having ensured that everything was ready, they shut off the lights in the room. Immediately after, Sam, equipped with night vision gear, observed the mosquitoes prepared earlier were suddenly guided by some power. They flew onto the mysterious patient's body, sucking his blood greedily. Soon after, they became plump. Sam captured the mosquitoes alive. At this moment, the mysterious patient suddenly went into convulsions. The director claimed that this was quite normal for the treatment. He then ordered to place more mosquitoes onto the patient to suck his blood, so Henry manipulated the mosquitoes again to repeat the previous process. After going back and forth, the patient still showed no signs of waking up. However, Henry was running low on energy, losing the power to control the mosquitoes anymore. The director cursed under her breath, saying no more. She immediately went to find Ivanov, who was locked in with Lisa, hoping to ask him for help. In exchange, the director would teach him more methods for treating demons, and in many matters, she would take Ivanov's opinions as important references out of the professional ethics of a doctor. Ivanov didn't think much before agreeing to it. Under the director's guidance, he finally saw the mysterious patient. It was an elderly man. According to the director, some people, after being completely controlled by demons, enter a state of brain death. This patient was one of them. According to the director's plan, Ivanov should enter the demon world to negotiate with him. To accurately locate the elderly man's consciousness, Ivanov had to swallow the mosquito containing the man's blood. Seeing such a disgusting thing, Ivanov frowned. But to save the man, he swallowed it anyway. The next second, Ivanov found himself in another world. Unlike the previous Crimson, this was a jungle shrouded in mist. In front of him was a very old wooden cabin. Ivanov pushed the door open and saw the old man in his youth, along with a mysterious little girl who bore some resemblance. To the director, Ivanov intended to tell them that this was an illusion made by the demon, in the hope that the old man could stay awake. However, after just a moment, Ivanov realized that they seemed unable to see him at all. He couldn't influence the surrounding environment at all, but could only watch the old man immersed in the illusion. After a moment, the old man carried the girl back into the cabin and tightly closed the door. Ivanov was about to push the door open again when he suddenly realized he seemed to be trapped in some sort of loop. Each time he pushed open the door, he would enter through the front door again, but he was sure this was not a time loop, as the sounds of the girl's cries for help began to echo in the cabin. Ivanov tried again and again, but no matter what he did, he couldn't break the loop. Meanwhile, in the real world, Ivanov's condition became very bad. His heartbeat was about to stop, and the medical staff were trying all out to save him. However, it seemed to have little effect. After trying for a long time, the surrounding scene suddenly changed. It turned out to be a confession room in a church. The crimson light around him made Ivanov realize he was still in the demon's world. Just as he pondered how to leave, a shadow suddenly appeared outside the confession room. The figure asked Ivanov about his origin. Upon hearing about the director, the figure acted as if he was familiar with her and offered to send Ivanov back to the normal world. But he needed Ivanov to take a coin to Director Knock. Ivanov didn't understand the reason behind this and could only agree. So, Ivanov, who was sent to the morgue, suddenly awoke from the bed. If he had been any later, he probably would have been dissected by the attendant. In addition, he indeed had a mysterious coin in his hand. Ivanov found Director Knock as per his agreement with the figure and handed the coin over to her. At this moment, an unexpected event occurred. Knock screamed and then fainted. The situation here quickly attracted everyone's attention. The HR personnel hurriedly took Knock to a secret place and activated devices to imprison her. Ivanov didn't understand why this was happening. When Knock woke up, his temper changed dramatically and started to attack everything around him. If it weren't for the electromagnetic cage holding him back, Ivanov and the others might have been harmed as well. As for why all this was happening, no one told Ivanov. The mysterious old man that Ivanov had finally awakened saw the director as soon as he opened his eyes. He seemed to have been frightened. However, the director did not care at all. She then suffocated the old man with a pillow. Why did she go to such great lengths to save him, only to kill him herself? Since that time she had helped, the director had indeed changed. She would no longer act stubbornly as she once did, and started to take Ivanov's opinions into account. For example, with this patient now, the director intended to put her into isolation, but under Ivanov's objections, she handed over full responsibility to him. According to the information, the patient was named Maya and was classified as a type L2 patient. She had previously used her words to incite multiple people to commit suicide, and even the police officers interrogating her had been convinced to die in the interrogation room. However, Ivanov still didn't quite understand the difference between type L2 and regular type 2, but the director clearly didn't want to provide him with further explanations. It was later that he learned through Lisa that type L referred to humans. In other words, this was a host that had signed a contract with a demon. Such individuals were commonly referred to as witches. According to Lisa, to sustain themselves, witches often need to gather energy from the outside world, and the most common method was sexual intercourse. In addition, demons can only occupy a witch's body after her death. However, due to the special nature of the contract, a witch, before her death, can transfer the demon to another person. Ivanov discovered through the test results that Maya had a tumor inside her and would likely die in about a month, so it was urgent to deal with the demon inside Maya, and the quickest way would be removing the tumor. However, before Ivanov could prepare for the surgery, the hospital suddenly encountered a major problem. A gang of sharply dressed individuals burst into the hospital, claiming to be officials sent by the higher government for an inspection. The medical staff, led by the director, had no choice but to greet them. However, this individual demanded that all hospital staff should come to greet them. Given Knock's current state, He certainly could not appear on site. In addition, there was also a mortuary attendant who didn't attend the welcoming ceremony. The leading official, Clint, became furious immediately and demanded severe punishment on those two. They could only explain that Knock was in a poor state, and that's something that Clint wouldn't believe. He insisted on witnessing it himself, so he went to that secret location, and in there, he saw Knock being detained. As Clint was about to approach Knock, he was suddenly attacked by a mysterious force. In Knock's eerie and chilling laughter, Clint's mind instantly cleared, and he dared not to stay in that area. The face-losing Clint, after leaving that space, immediately adopted an air of superiority again. He was planning to assert his authority over a few patients. Unfortunately, he chose Maya, and under her incantation, Clint's head instantly swelled with a large bump. Not only did he not regain his dignity, but he ended up losing even more face. The failures further provoked Clint's fragile self-esteem. He believed that everything happening now was due to the hospital's management system. He immediately decided to personally manage the place from now on. Although the director repeatedly hinted that Clint could not hold this position, he did not care at all.
Но поверьте, я руководил такими организациями, рядом с которыми ваша больничка, детский садик на лужайке.
As soon as he finished speaking, the Shredder aside began to work strangely. The Type 3 demon that Sam kept caused trouble again, which brought Clint into panic. The director intended to make him back down, but Clint then took out a talisman and was completely unaffected by the director. At last, the Type 3 demon was put back into its bottle. Now Clint regained his confidence again. He ordered Sam to destroy the demon in person. Seeing Sam's submissive demeanor, Clint felt emboldened once more. He ordered Ivanov, who was also a newcomer, to take him to the morgue to find the attendant. So as to establish his authority, Ivanov tried to dissuade him again, but Clint wouldn't listen at all. Reluctantly, Ivanov took him to the morgue. Now Clint still wanted to intimidate the attendant with his authority, but the attendant completely ignored him.
Но сюда живые не ходят. Ну ты заходи, если хочешь.
Clint was undeterred, but as soon as he stepped in, he fainted in the next second. If it wasn't his subordinate that had pulled him out in time, today might have been the doomsday for Clint. Clint now lost face again, and his anger swelled to its peak. He immediately vented all his fury onto the patient, Maya. He demanded that Ivanov, in the subsequent treatment, take an opportunity to kill Maya. Such an act in violation of medical ethics was immediately rejected by Ivanov. Their relation was officially broken. Leaving Clint's place, Ivanov came to the director to discuss the treatment plan for Maya. Because Ivanov had stumbled upon the idea of using a demon contract, and with no surgery, to settle the issue with Maya, while the director told him that this required the presence of at least a great demon as a witness before everything could be accomplished. But even so, a price was necessary. Ivanov didn't say much after hearing this, only with a plan in his mind. It was again the day for the patient Maya to replenish her energy. She did a quick search around and happened to encounter the young Henry. She planned to use some tactics to engage him more deeply. However, as the director had done this earlier, Henry quickly expressed his refusal. Ivanov happened to pass by Sam and noticed that Sam was about to destroy his pet demon, but he couldn't do it anyway, so he handed it over to Ivanov for help. Recalling Sam's reluctant expression, Ivanov decided to secretly take care of the pet for him. But right now, Ivanov had something more important to do. A few minutes later, he showed up in front of the operating table, and it seemed that he was about to perform tumor removal surgery on Maya, but in fact, he was planning to use a Type 1 demon inside him to complete a demon contract. As Ivanov was dealing with it as planned, the tumor inside Maya's body was quickly removed, but at this moment, she began to convulse violently. Ivanov decisively called upon the demon within her, saying that he would help Maya with a demon contract. As soon as he finished speaking, Maya immediately stopped convulsing. As a price, Maya lost her eyesight. Ivanov may have lost something as well, but it remained unknown at this time. Realizing that Ivanov did not kill Maya, and hearing that HR didn't supervise Sam in destroying the demon in person, Clint immediately suspended the titles of the three. Naturally, Maya was not unaware of this. She immediately sought revenge against Clint. However, due to the dissolution of the contract, she was now just an ordinary person, blind, and could do nothing to him. Instead, she was sent to prison by Clint on charges of intentional homicide. Ivanov watched all of this helplessly and could only confide in Lisa. During their conversations, their relationship grew closer. When Ivanov woke up, he found himself on drip feeding, feeling completely drained and weak. He realized something was going wrong. Later, he learned that Lisa was the director's daughter and a witch. Fortunately, she had shown him some mercy. Otherwise, Ivanov surely wouldn't have been able to get out of bed. However, during his time in a coma, The hospital had been thrown into chaos because of Clint. He ordered that all type 3 patients leave, and only a few pills would be distributed each month because the number of patients in the hospital had decreased. As a result, Clint dismissed more staff, including the HR department. Ivanov watched as his friend Henry was about to leave, asking him to take care of Sam's pet demon, since it would certainly die if it stayed here. Upon some thinking, Henry agreed. Meanwhile, since losing his pet demon, Sam could only spend his days in the greenhouse, taking care of the green plants. These were specifically cultured by the hospital, which contained a special substance, and this substance could suppress demonic abilities. This area was considered crucial for the hospital, but Clint didn't care about any of this, claiming that the medications could all be bought outside, and homemade medicine would bring too much liability, so he ordered Sam to eliminate the entire greenhouse now. By doing so, he had already shaken the foundation of the hospital. Even if Clint held a high position, the director had to give him a little punishment. So, she invited Clint to her office for a private conversation. In front of the charming director, Clint, feeling secure with his talisman and in the belief that she could do nothing to him, agreed immediately. On the way, he came across a scout leaving the office, indicating that a new patient had been delivered. So as soon as he walked into the director's office, he announced that all the patient's admissions in the future would require his approval. The director immediately agreed but took the opportunity to throw away Clint's talisman. Without this protection, how could Clint possibly resist the witch's allure? After this incident, Clint was nearly drained of all his strength, and the hospital finally regained its peace. Ivanov also met a new patient, who was named Lacey. He looked somewhat dazed and foolish. Upon a brief inquiry, it was learned that Lacey's mother had never shown up after giving birth to him. His father, Demit, was also very unreliable, as he didn't care about his son at all. He simply abandoned him at an adoption center. In the end, it was the hospital staff that lured him to the hospital with money. That's because, according to Ivanov's information, the type 2 demon within Lacey was quite unusual, which was usually inherited. They suspected that Lacey's father, Demit, was the carrier. Upon a thorough examination, it turned out that Demit also carried a demon. In that case, the hospital wouldn't allow him to leave. Based on the symptoms present in Demit, Ivanov finally identified the type of demon. He quickly found the director to discuss the subsequent treatment plan. After a brief contemplation, the director suggested they may use the nightmare from Rita to combat the demon within Lacey. According to the records, these two types of demons were deadly enemies. As long as the nightmare won, Lacey would naturally return to normal. Meanwhile, the nightmare was now being trapped in the amethyst. However, even so, there were still two problems to be addressed. First, Lacey's symptoms were transmitted by Demit, so to eradicate them, they would have to eliminate the demon within Demit. This meant using his body as the battlefield. Given the current situation, he certainly would not sacrifice himself, but even with just a sliver of hope, Ivanov would not give up easily. With Demit, he visited the dazed and foolish Lacey, constantly stimulating his heart with words in the hope of awakening Demit's conscience. Upon struggles, Demit came down at last. Now it's the problem with Rita. If they proceeded with the plan suggested by the director, there was a chance that the nightmare could break free. At that point, Rita would once again be possessed by it, and the situation would be worse. Lisa hoped that they could help. They told Rita to think it over about it. But to their surprise, Rita agreed without hesitation. She seemed very happy to be able to help. Now with both problems solved, Ivanov immediately prepared for the surgery. However, before starting, he brought two mice into the operating room. He then placed them in the same enclosure. It turned out that when the two demons encountered each other, they would immediately engage in a fierce conflict, and the emotions emitted during this time would continuously infect all the living beings nearby. However, as long as the two mice kept fighting, most of those emotions could be absorbed, thus reducing the impact on the medical staff. Plus, with this method, the winner could be identified obviously. As the surgery began, the two mice in the cage started to show signs of agitation. When Rita's kidney entered Demit's body, a fierce battle broke out. The two mice refused to surrender to each other, just like the two demonic forces within Lacey. At a certain moment, the white mouse suddenly killed the black mouse. Once the winner emerged, the vessel inhabited by the demon started to exhibit various reactions. Lacey suddenly fell unconscious. The medical staff rushed to his rescue, and after much effort, he finally woke up again. Now he was back to normal, no longer dazed and foolish. Seeing his son recover, his father Demit embraced Lacey tightly. Expressing his deep regret, Ivanov felt a sense of pride after healing another patient. Without knowing that a greater crisis was about to come, the next day, the entire hospital was suddenly pierced by a huge crack, with the source being the place where Nock was imprisoned. When everyone arrived there, Knock was already in a coma, and a subordinate of Clint's was also lying nearby, with his body being covered with a thick black, viscous liquid. Upon discovering this, they quickly transported him to the operating room. The director took part in his rescue in person, as it involved the demon within Knock. Everyone was attentive, seeing everyone being so serious. Ivanov curiously inquired about the identity of the demon within Knock. It was then that he learned from the director that the demon within Knock was called Lucifer, which was known as the Lord of Morning Star. The thick black liquid on the injured man was Lucifer's secretion, which had a very strong corrosive property. Now that Knock had escaped from his cage, Lucifer had also been completely unleashed. If he didn't find a new host in time, the hospital could be completely destroyed. Just as everyone was busy, more cracks began to appear in the hospital walls. As soon as people got close, thick black liquid would spray out from within. If the contaminated areas were not promptly removed, they would inevitably suffer serious damage. The current situation of the hospital was naturally observed by Clint. With the contact in these days, Clint had become very familiar with the circumstances here. He was very worried that Lucifer would escape the hospital, causing irreparable losses. However, when the hospital was initially designed, this issue was taken into account. The entire hospital was shrouded in a barrier, making it impossible for Lucifer to escape. Because the hospital, a long time ago, had mastered the methods to control Lucifer. Each director since its establishment had been a host for Lucifer. Upon hearing this, Clint couldn't help but have an idea. Perhaps he could take over Lucifer. This way, he could not only resolve the current issue but also legitimately manage the hospital. Regarding his naive thoughts, the director scoffed a bit. She told Clint that he simply didn't meet the criteria.
Чтобы осознанно стать сосудом для демона такого, то, чем вы дорожите больше всего на свете.
At this, Clint fell silent. Worse still, because of Lucifer's escape, the hospital was severely short-staffed. At this moment, another patient was brought in. This person also had a type 2 demon. As for his symptoms, that was his right hand uncontrollably bringing food to his mouth. Even though the patient was already too full to eat, his right hand continued to grab food relentlessly. The solution was initially very simple. Just remove the parasitic part of the demon in his esophagus, and the problem would be solved. But now, due to the shortage of staff, Clint ordered all surgeries to be suspended in order to focus entirely on the Lucifer incident. As a result, the man was tormented by the demon inside him all day long, and others also had no food to eat as a result. Ultimately, Sam thought of a physical therapy, which put the patient to sleep, thus temporarily stopping this farce. Ivanov reported this matter to Clint, hoping to proceed with the surgery for the man first. Clint agreed to Ivanov's request, but the surgery didn't proceed smoothly. The demon continuously resisted fiercely. If a forceful incision was made, it could very likely lead to the patient's death. At this moment, the demon-controlled right hand suddenly began to gesture something. After a long while, Ivanov realized that the demon was asking him to open a passage in the esophagus. This would significantly reduce the surgical risks, and afterward, as long as the patient fed the demon in the throat frequently, his limbs wouldn't be controlled by it again. This outcome seemed to be the best method available for now. Before Ivanov could catch a breath, a medical staff member informed him that Knock had woken up and requested to see Ivanov. Although he was somewhat puzzled, he approached Knock's bedside. Ivanov inquired about Lucifer's whereabouts. Knock immediately stated that it was in the hospital and that only one person was qualified to take over Lucifer, and that would be the hospital's director. Hearing this, Ivanov instantly realized that it was bad news, because in order to take over Lucifer, one had to sacrifice their most valuable thing, which most likely meant the director's daughter, Lisa. The reality turned out to be exactly as Ivanov suspected. The director was currently conducting a sacrificial ceremony in some operating room. She deceived her daughter, Lisa, claiming that she would lure Lucifer into her body, and then have the hospital staff eliminate her. Lisa, taking her mother's words, cooperated with her to enter the demon world. She was waiting for the moment when Lucifer entered the director's body, and she would kill her mother with a scalpel. What she didn't expect was that her mother made a move first. The director sacrificed her daughter, successfully gaining Lucifer's approval. The anomalies in the hospital finally ceased. For most people, this crisis was about to come to an end. Only Ivanov, who had rushed over, couldn't help but feel immense sorrow at the sight of his deceased lover. The director, however, was giving grandiose justifications as a stand-by, claiming that she had to do this for the greater good. Her tone only fueled Ivanov's anger. He picked up a scalpel and lunged at the Director's body, however, now under Lucifer's protection, a mundane object like the scalpel could not even come close to her body. Ivanov's actions enraged the director. She took control of the scalpel, redirected it to rest against Ivanov's throat. Just when Ivanov thought he was about to die, the director released her control over the scalpel, only to knock him unconscious. When he woke up again, he found himself in a hospital bed. Ivanov rushed to the conference room, being about to expose the truth about the director killing her daughter. But he was informed by everyone that there was no such person as Lisa. The demons that Ivanov spoke of were merely figments of his imagination. Ivanov stared blankly at Nock and the others. In his memory, the HR department had already been dismissed by Clint, but at this moment, he was sitting in the conference room, while Clint was nowhere to be seen. For a moment, Ivanov felt really confused as to whether those events were all just figments of his imagination. However, after the meeting concluded, Nock suddenly approached Ivanov, telling him in private that everything was not an illusion, but that this place was now controlled by Lucifer, and no one dared to go against it, unless the demon within Ivanov was stronger than Lucifer. Nock then left without looking back. Clearly, he didn't expect the director to see any connection between him and Ivanov. With Nock's reminder, Ivanov felt a bit hesitant. He went to the place where Lisa used to work, reminiscing about the beautiful times they had together. Ivanov wanted to resist, but he didn't know how to deal with Lucifer. At this time, a new patient was sent to the hospital. Ivanov was instantly taken aback because the person looked exactly like Lisa. However, everyone around him told Ivanov that it was not real. Being stopped by the people, Ivanov ultimately couldn't get close to Lisa. He was filled with resentment, and while he was pondering how to get close again, the HR personnel showed him a photo. It was a man, dressed in the same outfit Lisa had worn earlier. Later, under the HR's introduction, he learned that the demon was named Chimera. Its ability was to make those around see the person they missed the most. So, for different persons, it presented totally different forms. However, even after Ivanov learned the truth, he still wanted to approach it. He missed Lisa too much, so he sneaked into Chimera's room. Just then, the patient suddenly sat up and grabbed Ivanov, claiming that he wanted a deal. Faced with the demon's temptation, Ivanov was about to refuse immediately. However, according to Chimera, its host could help Ivanov to bring Lisa back. Hearing such a condition, Ivanov's heart was stirred. Chimera naturally sensed the desire in Ivanov's heart. It then stated that it had already made a deal with Ivanov. It turned out that the person in the confessional room was Chimera's host. This person had helped Ivanov to leave the demon world. With this foundation of cooperation, Ivanov decided to trust it. However, he wanted to consult others first to confirm whether Chimera was deceiving him. Then, Ivanov came to Sam. From him, he learned that based on the degree of Chimera's host, he would be very likely to accomplish such work. However, he also warned Ivanov that all deals proposed by Type 1 demons were almost always life-for-life exchanges, and under the witness of other demons, he told Ivanov to think twice before making any decisions. But Ivanov didn't care about any of this at all. As long as he could see his lover again, it didn't matter if he became a demon. After leaving Sam's place, Ivanov started the deal with Chimera. He first sought out Henry outside, using the demon pet in his possession to blow himself up on the spot. Due to his special identity, he was quickly transported to the hospital's morgue. The attendant, having learned the details of Ivanov's death, immediately guessed that he wanted to make a deal with a Type 1 demon. Meanwhile, Ivanov once again met Chimera in the demon world. Chimera proposed a thick stack of contracts and stated that as long as Ivanov signed his name on it, its host could help him return to the past. Ivanov decisively signed his name, and the contract took effect immediately. In the next moment, Ivanov found himself at the scene where the director was sacrificing Lisa. He rushed up to stop it, interrupting the ritual. The three of them were instantly transported back to the real world. Just at that moment, Sam happened to be passing by. The two hurriedly came to Lisa's rescue. However, before Lisa could wake up, the demon had already come to take over Ivanov's body. In the next second, Ivanov's body was covered in a black liquid. Meanwhile, the director, whose ritual was forcibly interrupted, was rapidly losing her life energy. Before she could find a way to replenish her energy, she collapsed to the ground, aging dramatically. Since Ivanov had been possessed by the demon, he had been hearing a voice.
Ты знаешь, скажи, Астерот.
It turned out that Chimera's host was one of the 7 demon lords of hell. The film ends here. Clinical Zone 13, a bold combination between mystery, fantasy, and medical themes, making it quite an innovative movie. In addition, the acting skills are also outstanding. With the director as a representative, it fully combines the coldness of a leader with personal emotions, coupled with the distortions of a mysterious world. It creates a truly wonderful feeling. If you enjoy this kind of film, I highly recommend watching Clinical Zone 13. If you like my channel, please subscribe to my channel.